You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima.
Good morning, Justin. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, it's been a good week, I would say.
A good week.
An exciting week.
Okay.
Sarah got her central line out.
That's right. Tell me.
Yeah, so we went in on Tuesday to the hospital for that, and we kind of didn't get a lot of info ahead of time on what to expect.
Okay.
For it as far as the procedure or anything. So we kind of went in assuming that it would be like when she got it put in, which is she had anesthesia. She was, it took a while because you got to come out of that and all. So it was going to be we were set up for it to be kind of a big day.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, it was a pretty straightforward procedure. She didn't need anesthesia.
Great.
And we were back. I think we had to be there at 7:30, and I think we were back home by 11.
Nice.
So it was a smooth morning. Her recovery has been pretty smooth.
Good.
She's still got a bandage over the site, which I think in a couple days she can take that off, and then for the first time in 4.5 years will not have a bandage on that part of her skin that's been covered, which is wild to think about.
Wild. And she can take a shower.
Right, without putting a shield over it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's really, really exciting after all of these years to kind of have that chapter behind us. And it's exciting.
We did a whole episode on I'm not ready to celebrate yet, right? Mm-hmm. Because you were like, I mean, it's exciting, but it's also, I don't know, I'm grieving. Mm-hmm. So how are you feeling now?
I think I'm at that celebrate stage. Yeah, I like it. I think that happening kind of at the same time as we were able to I think I talked about it last time we took that trip to see friends, that the world feels like it's opening up a little bit as far as what we may be able to do. And that just feels really good.
Yes. Well, I wonder how much of that is again, kudos to you for that you before didn't just jump into the celebration pool with everybody else, but that you let yourself feel the feels and be like, I'm just taking some time to process, and you can't be and now you're here, and that doesn't mean that you won't still process and feel the feels.
Right.
But I just think it's great that you were able to sort of notice that coming up and not just jump on the bandwagon of this is how I'm supposed to feel right now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you're able to feel those good celebratory feelings, but you didn't rush yourself. I think that's pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Which actually ties in perfectly to what we're going to talk about today in some ways.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about grief during the holidays.
Yeah.
And about how there are times that we are expected to feel certain ways because of the day on the calendar.
Right.
And then it doesn't work that way. I mean, I was thinking that for Thanksgiving when so many of my relatives were sick.
Yeah.
And yet we still gathered. And guess what? Here's the thing. We made it out alive. As a side note, all week I've been sort of holding my breath
right.
There's no way we're not going to get sick from all the coughing we were just around. Mm-hmm. But I think that I can safely say right now that we did, which is amazing. And thank you to all the Zicam of the world that I have consumed. But anyway, there were times that I was like, wait a minute, we are getting together just because the date on the calendar says that it's Thanksgiving. And if it wasn't this date and all these people were sick, there's no way we would be like, you know what we should do? Be in a room together.
Right. For sure. Yeah.
The same thing about emotions, right? I think that it's here come the holidays. Therefore, this date on the calendar says this. Therefore, we must be joyful and merry and bright.
Right.
And that's not always the way it works. And in fact, sometimes it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? That the holidays can bring up grief and they can bring up mourning, and which is perfectly natural, and yet even harder to face when Hallmark and the calendar and our families and whoever are being like, well, you're feeling joyful right now, right? The merriest season of the year, right? You're feeling fine, right? You know what I mean? And so I'm wondering, can we learn anything from what you went through of let's feel the feels and let's process that and all of that. And so, so I was hoping we could talk about that today, about sort of the grief that and some of these scenarios we're going to talk about are not necessarily ones that I'm personally experiencing, or maybe you're personally experiencing.
Right.
But I think we both have sort of thought more broadly around what might caregivers or people in general be experiencing during this time of year.
Right.
So when you hear that, what do you think about? Like, what are some examples of ways that people might be grieving at the holidays?
Yeah, I think for a variety of reasons, like something about December, the holidays that fall there, and like all of the, like you said, those media and messaging that like we should be happy and joyful and all of that, like that can really like heighten the like expectations of how we're supposed to be feeling, and really kind of like make everything you're feeling in that time like more intense, like maybe like good or bad.
Yeah.
And like there's all of these expectations around like family, at least in the United States, like gathering with your family and doing those things. That's a huge part of it. Like kids, and that's a big part of the holidays, like, you know, and for me personally, and like that's a big one that's hard around the holidays, is like because of Sarah's illness, like that's not something that was able to be part of our lives, and we both really wanted that to be part of our lives. And we had, you know, before all of this came, like, you know, dreaming up what our holiday traditions were going to be, you know, around, you know, what day are we going to do stockings, and then like how are we going to do presents, and like those are such like, I don't know, like iconic kind of like holiday traditions, and like what were we going to have for our traditions. And so there's just this kind of like big hole around the holidays. And for us particularly, the way our like family parties fall, like with her family we celebrate on Christmas Eve, with my family we celebrate the day after Christmas.
Okay.
And like primarily that's so like all of the nuclear families can have their like Christmas Day with the kids, right? And so it ends up kind of being this like, unless we're intentional and like plan something like we're specifically going to do this, and that's something like we want to get better at, like coming up with our own traditions of what to do that day. Like it's just this quiet, slow day where you're just like very aware of like this thing you really wanted that you don't have, and that is communicated to you as being such an important part of the holidays. And that's hard. So that's one. That's
a big one. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think I would just imagine, I mean, that's never gonna go away. Right.
In some ways I feel, and again, this is like, you look to the future and you see like our parents like celebrating with their grandkids, right? And you think about like, what are our holidays going to be like when we don't have like that? We don't have kids to gather with, we don't have grandkids to gather with, like at a certain point in time, like once our parents are gone, like are we still going to be gathering with our siblings for around the holidays? Like those kind of like, you branch out, and those kind of like, you don't get those same gatherings. And so like what are we going to have then? And that's that feels lonely. And again, that's projecting a lot onto the future that can't be known. But it's part of the whole, all of that grief that comes up with all of this.
Well, we've talked before about that concept of anticipatory grief. And so, I mean, because you've got like the past, the present, the future all kind of rolled up into one here, right? Like, so in the past, you thought something was going to happen. You planned for it. Now you're in the present and you're not living the life that you had expected. And that feels hard. And you're projecting into the future and already anticipating like, I'm going to feel lonely when I'm 70 and there aren't grandchildren around. Right. So it's just this like wraparound of grief. I think when you're saying too, I feel like what happens a lot at the holidays, even more so than other times, is this comparison.
For sure.
Right. The fact that you have siblings that have little kids.
And friends with kids. And
so that on that 25th day, if everybody were just couples, you know, hanging out at home, it would be like, oh, this is just couples day.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hearing that it sounds like maybe when you're knowing that other people are in their houses with little kids with stockings or whatever,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's that comparison that can feel really
Right.
hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking about that comparison piece a lot too, because I think when we get together with family, that just, you kind of can't help but do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think even about looking around and thinking like, our life looks different.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, but when you're in your own little house, you don't really realize it.
Yeah.
But then when you're with other people, you're sort of like, oh, that family, the dad doesn't have to go rest in between each meal. That
Right.
family, they were able to go on this big trip and they don't have to get travel insurance. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just this comparison thing. And I think that happens anyway, right?
Right.
I think here's a thing. Holidays in general can be challenging. Family dynamics can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add in caregiving, and my goodness, it's like a triple threat, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of these things would apply to anybody out there.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that our caregiving layer adds an extra thing. So I think with our comparison, that can happen anyway. But in our situation, it's more like our life. We thought our life would look like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Like this life I'm seeing play out over here with these other family members. But it doesn't and it can't. And then that brings me some grief to see sort of like that play out differently than what I'm living.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also when I think about being with family, I think sometimes, especially family you haven't seen for a while, it's the like seeing your situation and your person through somebody else's eyes. So like, let's say like your person has declined, or like you're just used to like hooking them up to the IV pole, or you're just used to like the urostomy bag, or you know what I mean? You're used to the stuff, but then you're seeing other people see that.
Right.
And other people be like, whoa, they look a little worse for the wear than they did a year ago, or they hook up to an IV pole. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's that seeing it through somebody else's eyes that can cause some of the grief of like, oh yeah, my reality is different.
Yeah.
And that can feel hard, you know, to realize that when it just feels really normal on your day to day. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah. I think another area that I think grief could certainly come in is if like the person you're caring for is declining.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe it's a parent who is getting dementia, and it's like, is this the last holiday they're going to remember me? Is this the last holiday that they're going to be able to attend a family thing? You know, all of these, like, is this the last holiday that we're going to be gathering in their home?
Yep.
You know, all of that kind of stuff would certainly be cause for a lot of grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, even to the point of like, you know, is this the last holiday I have with them? Or like, how many more holidays do we have? And that's got to be really, really hard to like to deal with. And then on the other side of that, like holidays and anniversaries, like you feel loss like more there, I think. And so like if you have lost, whether it's the person you're caring for or like, you know, anyone in your life that you've lost in the past, it doesn't have to be recent. Like you feel that loss, like that grief and mourning come up like forever sometimes. And so like, it's just, that's another area where like you feel that maybe more heightened, or the potential for that is there.
It's like this timestamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like we all come together on the same day and we take a picture around the table and we do the thing. And so this timestamp of like, well, on this many years ago, this person was there and now they aren't. Or in next year's picture, who's going to be missing?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Or who's like, you know, look at, you know, like who's, like you said, does sort of like the progressing in a way. I mean, in some ways, I think it kind of kicks us into gear in a good way. Like I know last year around this time, Sean's mom had just recently been diagnosed with lymphoma. And we were like, we're all going home for Christmas.
Right.
Because there were moments of that, like, is this it? Is this a big deal? And so we're all of us trekked home, you know, to be there. And I'm so glad that we did. And we might not have if it had not been for this diagnosis. And now it's a year later and she's cancer free. And that's a fantastic, right? So it can also be a timestamp in that way.
Right.
Like I was thinking last Thanksgiving, my dad was in the middle of treatment for prostate cancer.
Right.
And now, like, we don't even think about it because he like finished and it went beautifully and
Yeah.
he's free and he's great. And so it's like, oh yeah, look at us. Like, you know, like, so it can go the other way, right?
Right.
That we can have those things. But I think it's this timestamp thing of that again, that comparison of like, how was everybody doing last year?
Yeah.
What's happening now? What's going to happen in the future?
Right.
Yeah. We in our family, actually, my 98-year-old grandmother is moments from death. I mean, like, we're just, you know, my parents and my aunts and uncles are all gathered around her and have been for the last week and just sort of waiting for these last moments. And she has just lived an incredibly beautiful life, was like not sick a day in her 98 years. And has my grandfather died when I was in high school. And so she has for decades been like, wow. I'm ready, God, let's go. Let's do this. But I mean, it feels different that it's happening at this time of year. And as we were looking through pictures and all of that, it's like, oh, remember when she was here for Thanksgiving and remember, you know, and all of those things. And so I think that's going to feel like a different thing because it's going to happen at Christmas, you know, or around Christmas time for us. Yeah. I think something, and, you know, I love that at this very moment, both of our two households, I'm going to knock on all the wood, are in pretty good situations, which how often is that happening? Right. But I know that both of our families have had moments when our people were not well enough to attend something. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you have referenced like that was at that very first year and it was like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, whatever. And you were just home by yourself. Yeah. It was like a really low point for you. Is that right?
That's right. We, Sarah had like a really intense migraine. It was kind of what started this whole progression. And, if I recall, like she wasn't able to attend, I don't think, my family's gathering. I don't remember if she was able to make it to her family's gathering either. And so and that was for several years, that was a thing where it was really hard for her to attend those things and she maybe wouldn't be able to. And so I would be there alone, and you're just very aware of how your life is so different. Of how the person that you love more than anything, like, can't be at this supposedly joyful gathering with you and everyone. And your mind is back with them at home, and it's hard for you to be present. But yeah, that Christmas Day, I think she was upstairs sleeping, and so I was trying to be quiet, and I think I shined my shoes. That sticks out as a memory. Like, I just kind of didn't know what to do with myself. And that was a very lonely Christmas Day. Yeah. And
I appreciate that you know, it can be lonely because you're in your house by yourself and you're not even with your person because they're upstairs. It can be lonely in a room full of people. Yeah. Right. So in either of those situations, it can feel so lonely. And I think that, again, like, if it wasn't this day on the calendar, your family would have likely been like, oh, Sarah's not feeling well, let's reschedule. Yeah. Right. But because it's this thing that it's like, we're all coming together on this day, it sort of forces us into like, whatever's happening in anybody's family, this thing is going to happen. So it would be one thing if the two of you said, you know what, this year, we're going to just do something on our own. Yeah. Right. If you had made that decision, if you had that autonomy to make that decision, that would have felt different. But instead, it's like the migraine made the decision. Yeah. And so you didn't get to pick to stay home. You didn't get to pick that she was going to stay home. You didn't get to, you know, all of that. And I think that can, again, because of the day on the calendar, it can feel so hard. There was this thing I remember I wrote a long time ago called something about a Tuesday. And essentially it was Easter, I remember. And it was like, things were just a hot mess over here. And I think I said that if it was just a Tuesday and things were a hot mess, that would feel fine. But it was Easter, which is something that my family celebrates. And it was like, we couldn't be at church and we couldn't be with the family. And we were seeing all these pictures of people doing a thing. And it felt way harder than if it was just a Tuesday. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I think that's part of it, is like just the date and then seeing that everybody else is doing something on that day heightens that. Yeah. Than if it was just a Tuesday and you were at home and your wife was upstairs with a migraine, you know? Yeah. Right. So we've talked about all the ways it's hard.
Yeah.
I think one thing just to like, these are the ways that we mourn and that we grieve and that all of that. Oh, I want to add one that I just thought of.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is that sometimes we can mourn and grieve that, and this ties into last time's episode about being seen or not being seen, that we can mourn and grieve that our families are maybe not, and I'm just being hypothetical here. I'm not talking about my family or your family or anybody, just this can happen in families, that the way our families are not showing up for us the way that we hoped. Right. It's like a time that you step into your family relationships and you kind of look around and you might realize like, oh, wow, like nobody's asking how my person is or nobody's that, you know what I mean? And that can be this grief of like, really, family? You're not showing up for me right now, or you're not seeing me, you're not acknowledging.
You're grieving a support network that could be, that maybe you wish was there, that just hasn't materialized in a way that you, that would be, because you would be around all of those people that like, and just feeling that difference and that, that would be hard.
Yeah. So I think that on top of all the grief stuff, we just need to acknowledge like holidays are hard. Also, it's dark.
Right.
It's cold where I live, where a lot of people live. It can take there's a lot of time expected. Like it's like presents and you know what I mean? Like a lot is expected of you. You might have to travel. So grief aside, right? It's just
a busy time. Yeah.
A busy time. So all of that's hard. So what? So what?
Right.
So is there anything that we personally, knowing this, going into this season, can do for ourselves? Yeah, let's start there. What can we, since we know that, do for ourselves?
Yeah, I think like you just alluded to, the busyness and just the like, I don't know, even sometimes chaoticness around the holidays. Like it's likely that we're already worn down and we're already worn down as caregivers. So like, I think a big thing is just being really gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Like don't set up these like big expectations maybe. Like I think that, if this isn't the Christmas, if this is, I don't know, whatever if you have a holiday tradition where you, I don't know, drive around the neighborhoods and see all the Christmas lights and like it doesn't happen, like maybe that's okay. I mean, you can grieve that it didn't happen, but like just don't set expectations that are just like create more stress even maybe.
Yeah.
So I think that's something just to kind of knowing that you're going to be potentially feeling grief and other feelings around this time and like everything's heightened, like go into it with a like, this is going to be this may be a rough time that we're going into.
Yeah.
And like, I see the grief, I see the pain, I see the mourning, and like, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Just kind of setting that as a posture going in, I think could be helpful. I think, like we don't, and being in a place where you can set aside time to like, let yourself feel the feelings.
Yeah.
And that, that may not be at the party where the grief washes over you. Like maybe for reasons you need to like kind of hold it together. But then if that has, let yourself afterwards have some time to like, let that flow through you.
Yeah.
Like we talk about with the boardroom, like see who's there.
Yeah.
Check in with yourself.
Yeah.
On that.
Can I hop in real quick before you go
absolutely.
On? When you were talking about the expectations, I want to also think about what are the expectations? Like, why are they there in the first place?
Right.
So if it's a family tradition, you like going to look at the lights. Fantastic. Right. But is that important just because it's what we've always done? Or is it important because like it brings your family joy? You know what I mean? And so for some of these things, like, why is it that I feel like, we haven't put up a tree or anything yet. And I'm a little ambivalent about it. Right.
Yeah.
Not because of grief, just because I just, whatever, feels like a lot of work. But, so again, like, it's like, why do I feel like I need to put up a tree? Because that's what people do. Do I, you know what I mean? Like, so making some decisions about how you're going to spend your time and energy based on what you and your family want and need, not because like you can see someone's tree through the thing or you see on Facebook that everybody's out caroling or do you know what I mean? Like do things, like prioritize the things and think about why you're doing them and not just because it's what's been done, or it's because it's
Right.
what everybody else is doing. Do you know what I mean? And if that's the
Yeah.
reason why, then cross it off the list.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? You know,
Yeah. I think that's
I know
smart.
it's not that easy, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. You had
Oh
something else you were
no.
going to say.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. Like if you are at an event and like it's also okay if you've got to bow out early.
Yes. Yep.
Like I think prioritizing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that there can be a like messaging around the holidays that it's like making sure everyone else is okay. And I think we as caregivers like have this natural inclination to like that's a big part of what our life is making sure that someone else is okay. And I think that we often sideline ourselves in that, but like try not to do that. And like if something is just too hard, like you don't have to continue subjecting yourself to whatever stimulus that is that's making this feel so painful. Like it's okay.
And I think it's an interesting thing you just brought up, because I think I always thought like, oh, maybe we'll have an exit strategy because Sean might need it.
Right.
But I don't think I've thought about it because I might need it.
Yeah.
You know, and you were talking about the stimulus that might be painful, but it could just be the stimulus in general.
Right.
That like we've just had a quiet couple of years. And so to be back in a family gathering with lots of people can feel like a lot of stimulation. And so I think we can, if it's okay with our person, we can use our person as the get out of jail card.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh, Sean's looking real tired. I think we should go. But I love thinking about too, like to have an exit strategy for my needs, not just for his, because I think that's the way I've always thought about it. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think another thing to think about is like grief is a normal thing.
Yeah.
And like there's nothing wrong with you that you are not, quote, in the holiday spirit, that you are
right.
Like there are a lot of people that feel grief and other things around the holidays besides joy that like for a variety of reasons. And like, it just, isn't what people just don't talk about it that much. Maybe. Right. I don't know. So like, there's nothing wrong with you that you're feeling this way. Like it's expected that this pressure cooker of a season like is going to bring up these feelings.
And I think that those feelings might show themselves as crankiness, as irritability, as impatience, you know, and so you might be like, why do I hate everything? You know, and then it's like, oh, because I'm grieving, or you know what I mean? Sometimes like we don't realize what's in the boardroom, right?
Yeah, right.
And so it could be that you go into your boardroom and you see that like crankiness is holding the hand of grief, because grief's like, I don't know how to show up. Frankie's is like, I do.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the thing too, is just to sort of pay attention to, it's not necessarily that you're going to sit in the corner and weep. It might show up in a different way, but grief is the underlying sort of emotion that's there. I saw something that was like strategies for people who are grieving at the holidays.
Oh, that's relevant.
Right. It is. And one of the things was aim for peace of being rather than holiday joy. And I appreciated that it was like, we don't need to aim for holiday joy.
Right.
It was like peace of being also seems like a high bar. I think it's a good thing to aim for.
Right.
But I think I appreciated it was like, can we aim for peace instead of joy? Because I think that those feel different. Right. And I also appreciated the word aim.
Yeah.
And not just like, here's what you need to achieve, but like, what can you do to bring some peace and comfort to yourself? You know,
I really like that as a goal, as opposed to like focusing on the, like somehow like joy feels like it's something that's more active, that's going to require energy. Me, and something that if I'm not feeling it is more of an effort to like fake it for the season.
Yep.
Whereas like, not that it's easy. I mean, I think it can be incredibly difficult to feel at peace with where our lives are sometimes. But there is like you can recognize and know that things are not okay. Things are really hard. Things are difficult.
Yeah.
And like, that's the situation. And also acknowledge that like, there's not a lot I can do with this situation. And like, that somehow it feels easier for that to coexist than like joy, somehow. And that feels like a more, I don't know, it even feels like a more healthy, just in general, like mindset to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard, in my caregiver boxes, I have these essential oil sticks.
Yeah, right.
And there's comfort, calm, and joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to a friend that I gave a box to the other day, and she said something, and I want to follow up to learn more. But she was like, joy, I'm not a fan of joy. Like, joy just feels unattainable. And I was like, well, maybe if you put the stick up your nose, like, and really inhale, it'll happen.
Right.
But I think people, I've heard that from people before too, like joy. I mean, maybe contentment, maybe like peace, but joy feels like a lot.
Yeah.
A lot to ask for. One of the other things on that strategy sheet I saw was find a ritual where you can be you. And I thought that was really lovely, because I think that when we go into family gatherings or group situations or whatever, like, we might sometimes have a proverbial mask on, right? Of like, I'm joyful and I'm fine and everything, you know what I mean? And we might not be at peace. We might not be be able to show up or feel like we're able to show up as our full selves, as our authentic selves. And so, like you said, with the boardroom, that's fine. Like, we got to get through the thing, but then having a time later or beforehand where like you can just be you.
Yeah.
Like, who is the person you can hang out with where you're just like fully you?
Right.
Or what is the thing you can do with yourself where you are just unapologetically you, so that there is room for that and for the feelings, for you to like crack open the Tupperware a little bit, or where you've shoved the feelings away for the event, to let it actually come out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that idea of finding new traditions or new rituals that fit with where your life and the person you're caring for are at. And so like you alluded, or like you talked about, why are you going out to look at Christmas lights in the neighborhood? Like, is that about seeing the lights, or is about that's the time that is spent with family in the car?
Right.
Like, and so you can get the thing you want without having to do the activity. Like, there are other ways to do that. Like, you don't have to, I don't know, if your family normally goes out caroling, like, and you can't do that anymore, like, you can sing songs in your house with family. Like, if your person is in bed and can't get out of bed, like, you can all come and sing songs there. And it's kind of like that's what on Christmas Day, like, Sarah and I want to try to build some sort of traditions that are like, this is what the two of us do on this day. And that's like, yes, that's helpful for this Christmas, but like, will be helpful like for all of the Christmases going forward, because it's this thing that we can look forward to that doesn't have all of the expectations of like the joy and kids running around and like presents and like highlighting the things we don't have. But it's something that like can focuses on the two of us and what we have. So like, I think if you can, it's okay to, if this Christmas is the first Christmas you can't do the one holiday tradition, like that's really hard, and I want to recognize that. Like, I'm not trying to say, well, deal with it. I want to be sensitive to that, because there's absolutely reason to grieve that. But like, it's okay to have something new than different, and something that is more accommodating to what the person you're caring for and you are able to do and participate in. And so, kind of, you can be a little creative. You can do something new.
And I think like that's the thing. That's like, it's fun to come up with rituals, and and those things. And we want those to be flexible. Right. So if you and Sarah come up with something for this year, and then next year it's like, oh, we can't do that. Do you know what I mean? That it's in this crushing, but it's what we always do.
Don't create a new expectation out of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope, I mean, I don't know what we've all learned from COVID, but we just had a whole bunch of years where we couldn't do things the way we wanted to. And we found other ways. And we survived. And so what can we take from that piece moving forward? And I think in some ways it was great, because there weren't expectations. Nobody, at least in some years, nobody expected, like, you're not going to get together with all your people. And it was sort of like, oh, there's no expectations. Okay. I think something I have to remind myself, because I am like the social butterfly and sort of the glue of many situations, is that sometimes, especially when I'm with relatives from out of town, or like when we go to Indiana and we're visiting relatives, is I feel like we are here and we don't see them very often. And so we need to make the most of every single moment. And every moment needs to be in conversation and bonding. And I've had to, over the years, it's taken me a while, but be like, nope, I can go lie down for an hour. And then when I come back, the conversation will be even better.
Right.
But I think that's, again, an expectation. And nobody else is saying that. I put that on myself of like, must make, the best of every moment. Nope, that's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah.
So I think that when we think about supporters,
right,
supporters can help. I think that's something. I also saw another thing that I was reading this morning about, like, it was for people in particular who are on the autism spectrum, but the person who posted it was like, I think they're good for all of us. And one of them was like, to understand that we people need breaks,
right,
and alone time. And sometimes especially when you're like together, like not just for like, okay, come over for 3 hours, although you still might need a break. Like when you're together for the weekend or the week or the full day or the whatever, like to take breaks. So I'm saying that both to the caregivers themselves, but also to the hosts, of like, offer a place to go lie down, or say like, let's all just have some downtime. How about everybody just go do whatever they'd like for the next hour? You know what I mean? Build that in, and don't feel like it has to be like activity, right? Because again, that's not going to be good for everybody. I think don't force participation.
Yeah.
So I think, instead of being like, we are playing a board game and all family members must be involved, right? It can be frustrating if there's people who are like, nope.
Yeah.
But recognize that maybe they're like tapped out, like they cannot do one more thing with other people. And so don't force participation of like, everyone's getting in the car and we're all going to go see the lights, right?
Yeah.
Realize that if they say no, it might not be that they're, hate your tradition. Maybe it's just they're tired and they need a break.
Yeah.
I think to recognize supporters that, like, as caregivers, we're often like out of our routine, out of our home base, out of our, like, all of these, like, a lot of that change can be stressful. So and we are on extra vigilance,
right,
watching our person in that situation. So then therefore we're more tired and all of that. And so I think just typical hard things about caregiving, multiply times the holidays added in.
Yeah.
So mourning and grief equals quite an equation of,
yeah.
I don't know what the equation is, but essentially just like as hosts to be, and family members to be sensitive, to be like, to what we might need and how we might show up. And if we leave early, to not be mad, and to,
right,
if we didn't bring everybody a present, or the present's not wrapped, or, you know what I mean? Just give us some grace, I guess.
Yeah. I think being aware as a supporter that this is a time that may be difficult for us as caregivers. We may be grieving. Things may not feel joyful. And so just like knowing that, being gentle and not like trying to minimize how we're feeling. Don't try to be like trying to cheer us up. Don't bring toxic positivity into it. Don't be like, well, at least you're here for the party, or, whatever it is. Don't try to bright side, but just meeting them where they're at, and like letting them know that it's okay, that they, if they can't, participate fully, like, I understand, and that's okay. Like if, like you said, if they have to leave early, because it's, for whatever reason, like, don't guilt them, like, hey, don't leave yet. Like, don't put a guilt trip on them. Just be understanding and accommodating. And I think, like, we talked about words recently, like saying that, like, hey, I'm glad you're here. I understand that, I know that the holidays can be really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad to see you here.
Yeah. And thank you for the effort it took to get here. Yeah.
Right. I think just hearing that as a caregiver, that like we said in the last episode, like feeling seen in this place, in this time, that can be hard. And it can feel like there's something wrong with us because we're not out, celebrating and joyful and merry like everyone. And everyone is not that way at the holidays too. Like that's many people, for many reasons, the holidays are really hard.
Yep.
For, so many different reasons.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, this whole, you have to be, merry and bright. Like it's not realistic and healthy and all of that. So like, I don't know. Don't push that.
Yeah. I know. I keep thinking so much of what we're talking about is not just caregiver related.
Yeah. Right.
So as you're listening, just realize everybody who's there is carrying something and is potentially grieving something from the past, the present, or the future.
Right.
Is tired or stressed or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so just be gentle with each other.
Yeah.
And think about why are we doing the things that we're doing, and are we doing them for the right reasons or just because it's what we do? And, just try to enjoy each other's company and knowing that and letting people show up the way they need to show up.
Yeah.
And leave when they're ready to leave.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of what's coming to mind, like, as we kind of wrap this up, is just this thought about like just being present. And so if you're a caregiver and you're going into the holidays, like, be present with yourself to know like what you're feeling and like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to be present with that. And like, there are times when, that doesn't always work. If you're in the midst of like intense caregiving tasks, like you can't just stop and do that, but like try to be aware of you and what you're feeling. Like if you are, you're at the family gathering, you don't know how you're going to feel when grief is going to hit, but like you can be present in the little moments that like you are there and can enjoy. And like these are moments that are beautiful. I'm here for these moments. And then the grief comes and you're like, okay, this is where I'm at now. Like, and then if you are a supporter or just someone else like interacting with people who are having hard holidays, like be present with them. In the small moments and in the like whatever is in front of you right then, because they may not, for reasons, may not have the energy to be there for whatever, don't be, oh, I'm looking forward to, when we do the dessert after dinner and like we do presents or whatever, like because maybe they're gonna have to leave by then.
Right.
But like focus on, I don't know, just being present is kind of what's hitting.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. Good. As we wrap up, I want to make a couple quick plugs, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is we talked a lot about the boardroom, and I recently got a book from the library called No Bad Parts.
Okay.
And it's about the boardroom is based on this theory called IFS internal family systems.
Okay.
And so this book is all about the boardroom concept and where it came from. So I've only started it, but I've heard a lot of people recommend it. And so far it's like, this is really good. So anyway,
nice.
Just wanted to plug that for people who are more interested in the boardroom situation. And then also if you're a supporter and you're trying to figure out what to get people for holiday gifts, just a reminder that we have these caregiver gift boxes in 2 different sizes that people can get at thenegativespace.life. Or caregivers, you could put it on your Christmas wish list if you're interested. And also that I offer one-on-one support sessions for caregivers. And so, people in the past have given like a scholarship or like bought a session or 2 for someone as a gift so that they could try it out. And so that's another option. And so you can reach out to me to set that up at Allison at thenegativespace.life, or you can reach me through the podcast information. So
great.
Just a couple of thoughts about ways to
that's great.
Show up for caregivers this season. So good. All right. Thanks for the good talk. This is a good sort of good timing as we go into this season. And so giving me a lot to think about as we move forward into these next couple of weeks. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been, as always, good to talk and a lot to, I don't know, think about or just be aware of as we enter into this holiday season. And just all of you out there, we're thinking of you and see that this may not be the easiest time. And feel free to reach out as well. We've got a box on our website, insickness.care, where you can message us. And we're always here.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later, friend.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.